Hello, and welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours, where I upload videos of live Zoom creative workshops from my Healing Art Happy Hour meetups. I'm Shauna Robeson from Creating Space Coastal, and this is the third installment of a 5-part watercolor foundations workshop. In this video, I will be discussing color theory in relationship to watercolor painting. Watercolor is a transparent medium, and getting the right color can be tricky compared to using other, more opaque mediums such as acrylic or oil. With these tips, tools, and lessons, you will have a better understanding of how to work with rather than against this watercolor trait, resulting in less frustration and more vibrant paintings. Handouts for this slide presentation are available for download at my shop at creatingspacecoastal.com. Happy creating!
All right, now we're going to go deeper into color. Here's a color wheel. I recommend getting this color wheel if you don't have one in the hand, because this rotates around and it can help you figure out what to expect. So if I add, for example, blue, it shows adding the primary colors. This is the color I'm going to get. So if I add blue to this on the color wheel, I'm getting green. Like if I rotate this over, it's going to show me a different color. So it's really a cool tool. It also talks about value and what you can expect different value wise. And it talks a little more about color theory, which I'll be going over, and even just choosing your color palettes. So here's a little bit of the lingo that you may hear. The hue is the color name. So pigment name is based on the mineral formula, like I talked about, cobalt blue. Marketing name is based on what the manufacturer wants to call it. They can call it, it could be called Winsor and Newton blue if they wanted to. So the marketing name doesn't necessarily tell you what the formula is unless they name it the same. And sometimes they are named the same. The value is the relative light or darkness of the color. So if you think about the grayscale, each of these colors, even within itself, it's going to have different values, but as a saturated value, it's still going to be different. So this yellow is going to be a different value than this blue, say. So this is looking at it compared to a grayscale. And then this is if we, like we did before, using the same color and looking at the gradient that one color can do. So, so that's basically being aware of having these multiple values in your pieces is going to make it more interesting rather than having everything the same value. Intensity is vibrancy versus dull. This is a more vibrant color, for example, than this. And you can also tone down your any color through doing effects like adding gray or black. You get these, you tone down the shade of it and the intensity of it. So you can create some effects and some moods by just adjusting that. Oops, bumped my mouse. By adjusting that. And intensity, that's what we talked about. And then temperature, as I mentioned before, so warm is advancing colors. They look like they're coming out at you. And I think about fire, flames coming up, right? Warm. So if you think about the rainbow colors, Roy G. Biv, so red, orange, and yellow are on the warmer side of the color spectrum. And then cool, which appears to be receding. And I think of deep ocean, deep water going down deep. And those are the GBIV, or the green, blue, indigo, violet. So on the color wheel, we see, these are more the warmer shades and these are the cooler shades. But even within each of those shades, there's warmer and cooler values, as I mentioned before. These, as I add more of the primary yellow, for example, I start to go, keep going warmer until at some point I'll start going cooler again. So just being aware that, it's really relative. This might be cooler than this, but it's all, the coolness of it is also relative to the other colors. So being aware of that. And then the color itself in mixing in other mediums, especially we do things like mixing gray, white, gray, or black. And then with mixing white, you get a tint of that color. If you mix gray, you get a tone of that color. And if you mix black, you get a shade of that color. In watercolor, because it's a transparent medium, we typically don't mix white in it to get tints. We usually just use less of the color to let the white of the paper shine through. And getting grays, if you mix colors across the color wheel, the opposite or contrasting color, that will create a shade of gray because they cancel each other out. So if you want to make a gray, say you're using, if you're using purple, for example, and you want to make a gray to be like a shade or a shadow of that purple, you can add some of the yellow in that purple and create a shade of this purple, and it'll have kind of that, it'll still have a little bit of that purple there, so it'll just look like a shade of that. So it's a little more natural to do it that way than just adding black, for example. You can certainly do that, but I think in watercolor, it looks more natural, I think, when you mix the colors to get them, rather than adding the white, gray, or black. So that's the difference in watercolor. To figure out the tone or the value of a color, they have these tools out there. This is basically clear plastic, and you look through it at something that's in color, and it'll make everything, it'll basically cancel it out and make everything look gray. So you can tell then you can kind of get an idea of what the value is. Because sometimes when we look at it in color, it's hard to, we get distracted by the color and it's hard to tell what the value is. So if you're trying to make sure that you keep a range of values in your work, this can be a tool that helps. This is also a way to help. You can kind of squint your eyes when something is behind, when you put this over the top of something, and it'll show through this little hole here, and you'll be able to compare it to the shade of gray. And that's, I think, even more helpful than these, to be honest. And then you can decide, okay, this is kind of a medium shade here. So I'm getting a good contrast in my work. And when you're trying to paint something, I recommend using that idea of the value of the grayscale in looking at whatever your subject is. So if you're going to paint this scene here, if you print it out in a gradient of grayscale, you're going to be able to really see the bright brights and really see the dark darks, and it'll help you in planning how to go about doing this artwork. So I find it helpful to look at it in black and white, and then you're not as distracted by the colors. This one especially, it's overwhelming to look at. There's so much to look at. And when I tone it down by making it black and white or doing a grayscale, I can really see, okay, I want these really dark darks in here. I want to keep some really light colors in here. So you just know where to keep that the lightest hues when you're starting to color, because you do have to work a little backwards with watercolor. You're working from light to dark, and you want to, once you lose that light, it's gone. It's harder to bring it back. So it's easier to plan ahead and make sure that you keep those spaces open and light. If you want those to stay light, you're going to want to think about that early on in the painting process, compared to acrylic, where all you have to do is paint white there. So, okay, primary colors, as I mentioned before, they're what create all the other colors. So the reason they're primary is because you can't mix any two other colors to get red. Now, you can mix other things with other colors to get variations of red, but you can't create red by mixing any other colors. Same thing with blue and yellow. However, they're the origins of making all the rest of the colors. So by mixing this red and this blue, you get the secondary colors. So this is violet between red and blue, and then between red and yellow, you get orange, etc. So a primary plus a primary equals a secondary color. Then you get tertiary colors. It does continue, but this is where we're going to stop. So if I mix then this secondary color, so I've mixed the red and the blue to make violet, and then if I take the violet and I add blue to it, I now get this tertiary blue violet. When you see these hyphenated names, those are usually the tertiary colors, or might even be beyond tertiary. But basically, you know, if I could keep adding some red to this color, and then I'd get red, red, violet, right? Or I'd get blue, blue, violet if I went this direction. So you can keep doing that endlessly, but that's basically how you mix the colors. As you move away from a primary and you add either a cool or a warm color, you get warmer and warmer, or cooler and cooler, like I talked about before. Opposites on the wheel, I mentioned complementary colors or contrasting colors. So these are the highest contrast, and you get some really good vibrancy. They pop against each other. Think Christmas colors, you know, green and red and white. They just really bring out each other. They can sometimes be a little bit too harsh. So, but they do make each other pop. So in this case, you do want to make sure, because watercolor is a transparent medium, that the color you're laying over the top of the complementary color is opaque enough, or is going to be saturated enough, that you're not going to get gray, because these two mixed together make a gray muddy color. And so if your color can't stand alone on top and it just shows through, it might look gray, or you might have to add more pigment to get it to hide the green underneath. So just be aware of that. You're not going to want to mix them together unless you're trying to get that gray color from, and that's kind of can be a fun effect to do that. So just be aware of that. But they do create this tension within the piece. There's also the analogous colors. So you'll see more, gives it kind of a more monochromatic look. You use 3 or 4 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So it can be any ones. In this example, it's this color palette here. I did add, for an accent, a little bit of a contrasting color, the blue, to make for shadows over here. So, you know, you can have accents. It doesn't mean you only get to use these colors, the analogous colors, but those give a nice, relaxing, calming, harmonious look. And, you know, each of these color palette combinations have a mood that they bring. This is called a triadic combination, and it's real vibrant. I've got these really deep plum backgrounds and the purples with some of those contrasting oranges, and then this like nature green. So that gives again another mood. So you can use these formulas to help you pick colors if you're just not sure what to use. You can go to these different established color groupings to help. And again, this is a very natural color palette, you know, looks real nature, the reds, the blues, greens, the purples, you know, this kind of combination. So look around in your life, your wardrobe, look on Pinterest, look at things that appeal to you, other paintings, other decorations, other, you know, patterns and color combinations in your clothes. See what appeals to you, and see if you can figure out which combination that is and what you tend to like. And then that can also help you figure out color palettes that are, you know, that you personally like. I mentioned this before. I'm not going to go over it again. I probably should have just deleted that slide, so I won't go over that again. But what I was telling you before about the formula, so that pigment yellow 1, for example, and this is at this artistcreation.com color index. This goes through all of the different index names and then tells you the historical name. So Hansa yellow, that might have been the original mineral, was this Hansa. And then these are the common names that all different manufacturers call it. So if you see pigment yellow 1, and these might even, if you find a cadmium yellow hue, for example, it might not only be pigment yellow 1, but if you see pigment yellow 1, you'll know that that's generally historically Hansa and could be some of these. So you would look at these colors to see if they're pigment yellow 1, if that's the one you're looking for to mix. So if you're back to trying to mix that Hooker's green, for example, and you want that formula that you found, this is a way to say, oh, what is pigment yellow or pigment green 36? And you can go to this chart and find out what that is and look at your paints to find out if you have that color. So it also tells you everything from toxicity, you know, what it's made of. There's a lot of information on this chart. Light fastness, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a cool, you know, if you really want to get into the color mixing and things like that, this could be a nice tool. I mentioned the color palette before. This is just a visual of that Winsor and Newton color palette, the warm and cool split palette of each of those colors, and ways that you could do gradients, you know, like I showed, making your own palette to see what the gradients look like, you know, because this is basically just a saturated, medium, and then light. And I'll be showing you a DIY color palette in a minute. So as I mentioned, this is my color palette. I showed that wheel before. I'll clean up these notes before I send them so they're not duplicating, but this is what I did for mine. So I took most of my palette. I didn't end up doing any of these because I just have too many colors. And this would be a huge piece of paper. So I didn't do the neutrals. I wasn't as concerned about what those look like, but I wanted to see what all of these colors mixed together look like. And how this works is I'm laying a row of this color. I lay all of my horizontal colors down first, and then I lay all the same colors over them, over the top, going vertically. And this way you get an example of what this color looks like on top of that color, and then also what the other color looks like on top of the first color. So you get to see both directions, because it may look different when this color lays on top of this color versus this color being on top of this color. And so you'll get a chart that shows both of those variations. And then the other thing I would suggest is doing a mixed palette where you actually mix them together on a palette and then do a swatch on a square, and they might look completely different. This is an example of these, you know, same ones, and a lot of them look the same, but some of them look really different. Like that one looks really different than what that looks like. So it may look different when you mix them together as opposed to glazing them or applying in layers. Creating your own do-it-yourself, you know, color wheel, mixing your primary colors with secondary and tertiary colors is a great way to understand what your paint can do and what your color mix is going to do. Now be aware that I'm picking a specific red. I'm going to write what I use. I have cadmium red, I have phthalo blue, and I have cadmium yellow as my primaries. But if I chose a different red, a different blue, or a different yellow, I'm going to get different colors here. So you could do different wheels for all of the variations of what you have as far as red, blue, and yellow. But this was sort of the most neutrally blue, yellow, and red that I had. So I used this. And my purple, you know, I don't love this purple. I probably would use different mixes to get a purple, but this tells me what these paints do. I do like this plum look of this the tertiary color though, mixing this mix with red. I like these colors. This is like an indigo color here. So while I don't love this purple here, this violet color, I do love these tertiary colors that come from it. So this just tells me what I can do with these colors and what range of colors I can get with this, using these three as my primary palette. And I do recommend you doing something like this. I also did it saturated and then mixed and then a light shade. Some of them didn't come out as visual. So just do it really saturated, then add some water, make a mix, and then add more water and make a mix. And that's how you do that. And just divide it into 12. I just did the tertiary. You could do the next level too. You can add as many pie pieces as you want.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Healing Art After Hours. You can download materials related to this topic, including PDF notes of PowerPoint presentations, at creatingspacecoastal.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this content helpful, and join me for the next video here at my Creating Space Coastal channel, where I hope to inspire you to create space in your life for fun. Thank you.